America is in the middle of a very serious moral and also economic crisis, and these two things are deeply interconnected. There is a really interesting article from Axios by a columnist named Zachary Basu. It's interesting because of what it exposes. The article is titled, "Never Back Down, Rich and Powerful Exploit Post-Shame Society." And here's what he says. America is reaching the pinnacle of a post-shame society forged by Donald Trump and reinforced by powerful patrons. Nearly 50 years after Richard Nixon resigned before ever being charged with a crime, the GOP is a month away from nominating a convicted felon to be president. Polls suggest the race is extremely close. While he may represent the most extreme example, Trump isn't the only one who has realized a lack of shame can be a crucial survival skill. Well, put aside the fact that our quote-unquote post-shame political society actually arrived with Bill Clinton, when it turned out that you could overtly make the case that it was fine to shtup the interns because that was, just a sex issue. The post-shame society has been in place for a very long time in the United States. The real question in the United States is why, in fact, we don't have a guilt-based society. So cultural anthropologists distinguish between two different types of society when it comes to sort of internal feelings about things that you have done wrong. What they call guilt-based societies and shame-based societies. So guilt-based societies are internally directed. They are typically linked with Judaic and Christian moral systems. These would be systems where you feel guilty before God because you have violated God's moral scruples. And that's typically what it means. You feel like an internal sense of guilt. Whether or not anybody knows about what you did, you feel internal guilt. A shame-based society is one in which society sets the standard. And society makes you feel ashamed and makes you, quote unquote, lose face. This is very much associated by cultural anthropologists with countries like Japan or China. The sort of idea is that you will be shamed into doing the right thing. Now, something has happened in America over the course of the last several decades as religion has declined. Guilt-based society has shifted into shame-based society, which has shifted into a post-shame society. So we used to be a guilt-based society where, people felt an internal obligation to do the moral thing. On the political level, what this meant is that politicians felt an actual sense of responsibility to solve the problems they were charged with solving. Not that they had to be shamed into doing it as much, but they felt like an internal moral compulsion to try to do things that they'd been tasked with doing. That they actually had a moral duty to do the right thing. And then, since the decline of religion, since the decline of people believing in moral absolutes, people started to believe in a shame-based society, and political correctness basically replaced in our moral system God. People were going to shame you into saying or feeling certain things. And that, of course, has sort of reared its ugly head again in wokeness, this idea that you can be shamed into using the proper pronouns. You have to be shamed into saying untrue things about how America is a white supremacist society, a shame-based society, which is the reason why you see people put flag emojis in their Twitter profiles, or why you see people put the dumb lawn signs on their lawn that talk about, in this house, we believe. That's a shame-based society. Because, again, it's all directed toward the public and what the public thinks of you. So we shifted from a guilt-based society in which your own internal moral standard, which typically had been shaped by your moral upbringing, made you feel certain ways about doing what you were supposed to do, into a shame-based society in which the society itself is going to shame you into doing things. And you would lose face if you didn't do those things. You had to post the black square during BLM, and you had to proclaim your solidarity with people who were rioting, or you would be shamed in public for not having done so. And now we have reached the sort of reaction to that, which is the post-shame society. I don't think this columnist is wrong in the sense that we are a post-shame society. I don't think that has to do with Donald Trump per se. I think that has to do with our entire rootless, godless system. That once you have a society that casts out God in favor of societal shaming, and then replace societal shaming with the blowback to that, which is, okay, well, obviously the standards of the society are just wrong. So we're not going to go back to internal feelings about a moral God and what he demands of us. We're just going to go to effectively moral relativism, in which society has set really bad standards. So we're just going to have no standards at all. And what you end up with is shamelessness on every single side. And in the political realm, what that means is that our politicians are frivolous, and they are shameless, and they are stupid, and they don't care about the actual problems that are facing the United States of America on a broad scale, which is why I'm quite pessimistic about the possibility that our politicians actually solve our problems, because they don't feel that they are somehow implicated in our country's problems on a moral level. They don't feel a higher moral impulse to do the right thing because it's the right thing. Because very few Americans these days, unless they are, I would say, regular churchgoers, people who are deeply ensconced in a religious community, people don't feel that anymore. the internal compulsion to do the right thing. They feel the shame-based society if they're on the left, or the post-shame society if they are on the right. And what you end up with in any case is just frivolity and stupidity. I take as my case 1A what's been going on the left, particularly at the White House. We'll get to more on that in just 1 second. First, have you ever gone into incognito mode on your computer? You know, incognito mode can be useful if, for example, you don't have a login to a particular website or something like that. But, you know, incognito mode, sometimes people use that to search for stuff that maybe, you know, they'd be embarrassed to search for. Well, here's the thing. When you do that, third parties like your internet service provider, your mobile network provider, even the admins of your Wi-Fi network, they can still see every website you're visiting. ExpressVPN reroutes 100% of your traffic through secure encrypted servers so third parties can't actually see your browsing history. ExpressVPN is by far the best VPN on the market. By masking your IP address, ExpressVPN makes it extremely difficult for third parties to track your online activity. It works on all your devices. It's really easy to use. Just fire up that app, click one button, get protected. But don't just take my word for it. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by top tech reviewers like CNET and The Verge. Protect your online privacy today by visiting expressvpn.com/Ben. That's expressvpn.com/Ben. You can get 3 months for free. expressvpn.com/Ben. Protect your internet activity today. So at the White House, which is supposed to be there to solve, you know, serious American problems, and I'll get to those serious American problems in a moment, things have just evolved into ridiculous displays of solidarity with particular interest groups, lest they be shamed by those interest groups. Because again, the White House is subject to the woke mandates of the society to which it holds itself standard. So Jonathan Van Ness from Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, I suppose, he showed up to the White House, and he arrived at the White House, was greeted by Kamala Harris at the White House. I mean, there's still, by the way, families of the soldiers who were killed in Afghanistan who have never been to the White House. But Jonathan Van Ness has been to the White House. Not just that, here he was in the White House press room addressing the journalists assembled.
Welcome today, everyone, to the White House. I'd like to briefly answer some questions. Go ahead, I'm ready.
JVN.
Oh, yes.
Is it true that is all your natural hair?
Yes, I can confirm that this is not a wig.
Follow-up question. Do you use your own products?
I do use JVN hair, actually exclusively for over 4 years. Next question.
Is it true Karamo is your favorite member of the Fab Five?
I will say that I can confirm that Karamo Brown is my favorite member of the Fab Five. I also have a very strict rule that if I'm only with one of our castmates, they are in fact my favorite.
Question, is this a serious country? Is this a serious country? When we talk about shamelessness in politics, this would be the question. Here's the video, by the way, of the members of Queer Eye for the Straight Guy arriving at the White House. This is a dude in a dress with long hair and a beard, by the way. Jonathan Van Ness. And there's Kamala Harris.
Can we talk on it?
Oh my God. This is the United States and our political class in a nutshell. If you want more of the American political class in a nutshell, the current mayor of San Francisco. San Francisco is a collapsing city. It has collapsed into crime, into drug use, into homelessness, defecation on the streets. It's a disaster area, San Francisco. But the mayoral debate in San Francisco is between London Breed and one of her rivals. And they were asking the really important questions. Again, these are signposts of a collapsing society. London Breed is running against a person named Mark Farrell. And here is what was the critical issue in their mayoral debate. Here's London Breed asking Mark Farrell to name 3 drag queens. This is like how people get elected in San Francisco. Not are you going to clean up the streets? Not are you going to get the drugs off the playgrounds? Not are you going to stop the shoplifting so businesses can come back to the city? Can you name drag queens? The signs of a post-shame, stupid, and frivolous society in which no moral standard is actually upheld other than perhaps sometimes the societal shaming that comes from the very woke left.
This is an opportunity to redeem yourself. And if you could name 3 LGBTQ advisors for your campaign and 3 drag queens in San Francisco.
Can you name 3 drag queens in San Francisco? The issues that the American people demand that there be answers to. And listen, we can all laugh at San Francisco, but the reality is that so much of our politics these days revolves around the frivolous and the stupid. And the reality is that the world is a very serious place. It's an actual very serious place. You can treat all of this as comedy. Honestly, it's really, really funny watching London Breed questioning other mayoral candidates to name drag queens. It's not even like name precincts in San Francisco. It's name drag queens that you know, men who dress as ladies and gallivant around in scantily clad outfits. I mean, yeah, it's inherently funny, but I'm not sure whether it's funny or whether it's sad. And this is part of the problem with our politics, right? If you laugh at it, it's really funny. But it also has some very real consequences. Now, right now, I'm in Israel for the Jewish holiday of Shavuot, as I mentioned on the show a couple days ago. And I got to say, it's a pretty serious place. One of the reasons it's a serious place is because Israel is under serious threat. It actually has genocidal enemies on nearly all of its borders who wish to slaughter every Jew they can get their hands on. That's a serious threat. And in the United States, we got serious problems as well. In fact, the serious problems facing the United States have worldwide ramifications. And yet the political class is totally frivolous, totally stupid. The political class in the United States, there are some serious people in Congress who I think are there for the right reasons. I think that you do have particular politicians who may be interested in solving problems from time to time. But overall, the general kind of arc of the political universe in the United States bends towards foolish frivolity, toward bread and games, as the republic dies from the inside. So here is a chart of the republic dying from the inside. This is a chart from the Federal Reserve, and what it shows here is the federal government's national defense consumption expenditures and gross investments, that is the defense budget, and the federal government current expenditures on interest payments on our debt. Our debt now exceeds what we pay. That's the insurance payments on our debts now exceed what we spend on national defense every year. This is a very real problem. If what we are paying to bondholders, many of whom are foreign bondholders, exceeds what we are spending on our national defense, that is the sign of an unstable and sick governmental structure. It means that we are not going to have the actual resources in order to arm up to face a hostile world, to keep the seas free. We are not going to have the ability to ensure shipping lanes. We're not going to have the ability to, for example, defend Taiwan in case of a Chinese blockade of Taiwan. A Chinese blockade of Taiwan, disrupting the semiconductor market, by the way, would amount to a global depression of extreme severity. Meanwhile, Jonathan Van Ness is at the White House gallivanting around in a dress. So, I mean, I guess that's the really, really important stuff that's happening, because obviously the post-shame society demands that you do whatever you can to pander to particular constituencies. In fact, the national debt is now so extreme that by 2034, it's going to exceed $50 trillion. $50 trillion. According to the Congressional Budget Office, they projected yesterday that the federal debt will exceed 122% of the U.S.'s annual economic output by 2034. The deficit will swell to $1.9 trillion this fiscal year and keep growing until the overall national debt hits $50.7 trillion a decade from now. That is according to the nonpartisan bookkeeper for Congress. By the way, it's going to go way higher than this, because if you think that the debt numbers that we're looking at right now are the end of the debt problem, you got another thing coming. The budget in the United States continues to expand. Medicare and Social Security are running low on funds. Within just a few years, the interest on the debt is going to exceed the payments that we owe for Social Security. Now, again, this is a bipartisan problem because our frivolous political class doesn't feel any sort of guilt-based moral impetus to solve serious problems. In fact, you're supposed to push those serious problems into next week for the purposes of winning today. And then once you win, what are the actual demands that are made upon you? They're fairly minimal. The demands of a party on its leaders, once those leaders are in power, seem to be somewhat minimal at best, particularly when it comes to the very serious issues of the day. You also have a collective action problem. In order to solve very serious problems, you're going to have to do things that are generally unpopular with the populace that looks at the impact of the policies here and now rather than 10 or 15 years from now. This is one of the reasons why we have a republic, not a democracy, because the mob, the general public, tends to think in terms of what do I want today. It is the job of politicians to telescope and balance those needs with the needs of a country in the future. But our politicians don't want to do this anymore. They've abdicated any sort of guilt-based obligation to do the unpopular thing because it happens to also be the right thing. So the debt continues to shoot up under both Republicans and Democrats. We'll get to more on this in just one moment. First, getting a good night's sleep, given what's going on in the news, that feels pretty rough. I've personally experienced how a bad night's sleep can wreak havoc on the entire next day. In fact, it happens to me a lot. But Beam's Dream Powder can fix that problem for you. It's an all-natural nighttime drink blend that's improved 15 million nights of sleep. Thanks to Beam, my producer Savvy has been able to fall asleep faster, stay asleep, and wake up energized. Really, she does not stop talking about it, like ever. It's kind of irritating. Beam Dream Powder contains a powerful all-natural blend of reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. Today, my listeners get a special discount on Beam's Dream Powder. That's their science-backed healthy nighttime for sleep with no added sugar. Better sleep has never tasted better. Just mix some Beam Dream into hot water or milk you stir or froth you enjoy before bedtime. Don't waste another night battling the bedtime blues. Go and get Beam today. Your weary self will thank you. If you want to try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder, take advantage of 40% off for a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com/Ben. Use code Ben at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/Ben with my promo code Ben for up to 40% off your order today. Maya McGinnis, the president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, said at a moment we should be looking at what spending to reduce and how to increase revenue. The national agenda is full of conversations about huge new tax cuts and major spending initiatives. The risks we run from this growing mountain of debt run the gamut from slower economic growth to lower incomes, an inability to respond to emergencies, and a weaker role in the world. Nothing could be more urgent, but none of the leaders have a plan to address this glaring problem. Now, I don't believe that tax increases are going to result in quite the boon to tax revenues that Democrats seem to think that they will, because already Americans pay fairly hefty federal taxes at the upper end of the scale. The reality is that if you want to really increase tax revenue in the United States, you're going to have to do exactly what the European countries have done and actually lower the taxable basis, meaning that you're going to have higher tax rates kick in at a lower number. Right now, people who are making over $400,000 a year are paying the lion's share of the taxes in the United States, or at least a huge percentage of the taxes, far disproportionate to their actual earnings in the United States. If you look at Europe, the only way that they can even pretend to support those gigantic, unhinged budgets is by taxing people who make $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year at 60 or 70%. But according to the Washington Post, the debt burden could present risks in bond markets as creditors look increasingly skeptically at the government's ability to make good on its ballooning borrowing, according to experts. That, by the way, will lead to inflation, because the reality is that in order to buy back the bonds, for example, you're going to have to pay in inflated dollars. If you don't have the regular dollars, you're going to have to make up those dollars somewhere. Typing a zero on a keyboard at the Federal Reserve is going to be an easier way of generating the money to pay back debt than is generating the sort of economic growth necessary to support the kind of budgets that we have been blowing out here. This is why it's so unthinkable what Joe Biden has been doing with the federal budget. It is one thing to suggest in 2020, in the middle of a pandemic where nobody knew whether you were even allowed to go outside for the first few months, that the budget had to increase in order to compensate for that, because basically the government said you couldn't run your business. And so they had to compensate people for that. It's another thing to say once people are back at work, we're still going to blow out the budget to the tune of $7 trillion a year. Michael Peterson of the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, he says the harmful effects of higher interest rates fueling higher interest costs on a huge existing debt load are continuing and leading to additional borrowing. It's the definition of unsustainable. So because we now have increased the interest rates in order to lower the inflation, that also means that we are paying higher rates on our debt. Right? The new bonds that are going out the door are higher rates. And because of that, that is increasing our national debt, or at least the interest payments on that national debt. The problem is if we lower those interest rates, then the inflation goes back up. Hey, these numbers, if anybody understood them, would be terrifying. Federal banking regulations have been slow to recover payments from recently failed institutions. Projected Medicare outlays increased by $50 billion. Again, the annual budget spending versus revenue is going to continue to increase. That gap is going to continue. That delta is going to continue to increase. And that's the thing that nobody wants to actually take responsibility for, is solving the serious problems that face the country, let alone face the world. We're happy to argue at the tip of the iceberg over frivolous issues, or issues that maybe are not frivolous but implicate deeper moral policies. But in terms of the actual reasons the government was instituted, in order to provide for the national defense, or if you are looking at the rationale for having a government that provides goods and services to its people, at some point you're going to have a stable basis for that government. But none of our politicians are capable of even looking down the line at that, because they have there's no internal compass driving them to solve the problem. And that is a real bipartisan problem. Neil Ferguson talks about the consequences of this in a piece over at the Free Press. So Neil's a terrific historian. And he's writing now over at Barry Weiss's Free Press, which is an excellent publication that is well worth your time. He has a piece basically asking whether the United States has become the Soviet Union, not because we have a centralized economy, but because we seem to be a state that's in a bit of collapse. He says there's a world of difference between the dysfunctional planned economy Stalin built and bequeathed his heirs, which collapsed as soon as Mikhail Gorbachev tried to reform it, and the dynamic market economy we Americans take pride in. In America today, The bad conditions of the Soviet Union exist only in the bottom quintile of the economic distribution. But he says a chronic soft budget constraint in the public sector, which was a key weakness of the Soviet system. I see a version of that in U.S. deficits forecast by the CBO to exceed 5% of GDP for the foreseeable future and to rise inexorably to 8.5% by 2054. The insertion of the central government into the investment decision-making process, I see that too, despite the hype around the Biden administration's industrial policy. Economists keep promising us a productivity miracle from information technology, most recently AI. But the annual average growth rate of productivity in the U.S. non-farm business sector has been stuck at just 1.5% since 2007. That is only marginally better than the dismal years of 1973 to 1980. He also points out that the U.S. military may be a paper tiger. He says the U.S. defense budget does indeed exceed those of all the other members of NATO put together, but what exactly does that defense budget actually buy us? Senator Roger Wicker has a brand new report talking about the status of the military. He says that our military is not nearly enough to contend with the coalition against democracy being built by China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. In Wicker's words, quote, America's military has a lack of modern equipment, a paucity of training and maintenance funding, a massive infrastructure backlog. It is stretched too thin, outfitted too poorly to meet all the missions assigned to it at a reasonable level of risk. Our adversaries recognize this. It makes them more adventurous and aggressive. And apparently, according to the CBO, again, the share of GDP going on interest payments on the federal debt will be double what we spend on national security by 2041. Double. Right now, it already exceeds. It's going to be double. You're going to be spending twice as much on just the interest payments on the debt as we currently spend, or what we will spend on national security by 2041. And again, that is also due to the fact that we are squeezing defense spending down at a time when Russia and China are getting significantly more aggressive. We'll get to more on this in a moment. First, are you or somebody you know fighting the battle against cancer? For the last 25 years, Invita medical centers have been pioneering personalized, cutting-edge treatment programs for patients all over the world. Invita has been the leader for patients looking for advanced immunotherapy and genetically targeted therapies, all while focusing on fewer side effects and better patient outcomes. As a global leader in oncology care, Invita is committed to healthcare freedom for everyone. They've spearheaded a revolution in employer health insurance options, empowering companies to provide their employees with access to not only top doctors, hospitals, and technologies, but also the first of its kind nationwide personalized medicine coverage. Invita is doing all of this, plus offering significant tax and cost savings, full transparency, and liberation from the grip of those commercial insurance carriers. Whether you're a patient in need or a company looking to break free of monopolized healthcare insurance, Invita could have a solution for you. To learn more about their treatment options and their company insurance programs, visit Invita.com or visit InvitaHealth.com to learn more about their company insurance programs. That's Invita, spelled ENVITA.com, for treatment options, or InvitaHealth.com to learn more about their company insurance programs. I mean, in today's foreign policy news, the Russians are meeting with the North Koreans, mainly because they are looking for armaments from the North Koreans. According to the UK Daily Mail, Kim rolled out the red carpet for the Russian despot with a glitzy welcome ceremony at an airport in Pyongyang. The two dictators were pictured shaking hands, hugging each other on the runway before entering the same limousine, which set off behind a huge motorcade involving dozens of motorbikes. Making his first trip to North Korea in 24 years, Putin said he appreciates the country's firm support of his military actions in Ukraine. The Kremlin launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, of course, in 2022. He said the countries would continue to, quote, resolutely oppose what he described as Western ambitions to hinder the establishment of a multipolar world order based on justice, mutual respect for sovereignty, considering each other's interests. By the way, who thinks that the Russians are really looking for a multilateral world order based on justice, mutual respect for sovereignty, and considering each other's interests? Has Russia ever considered the interest of another country? Like, ever? I mean, even during World War II. Like, has Russia ever done that? That is not the history of Russia. How about North Korea? Are these people who are deeply concerned with justice, mutual respect for sovereignty, and considering each other's interests as they threaten South Korea? In other words, the world is a very dangerous place. History didn't end in 1991. Americans seem to believe, we do, we all seem to believe that we live in this magical utopian fantasy post the Cold War where history has ended, where the world is filled with nice people now. And so the United States can blow all of its money on a variety of gags and stupidities, and meanwhile, lower our military budget and not think about our structural problems in a serious way, and everything will just sort of be okay. It'll sort of be okay. We saw the consequences of this stupid thinking based on the inflation that jumped into play in 2020, 2021. Up to then, the kind of highest form of this, the apex predator of this theory that everything was fine and we lived in the post-historical world, was the Elizabeth Warren modern monetary policy idiocy that suggested that you could endlessly spend money and it would never come due at all. But we're back to that. We're going right back to that. And again, I say this is not just a governmental problem. This is a moral problem. This is a moral problem. There's a phrase that used to be used with regard to elites in Great Britain. People used to suggest that they had noblesse oblige, right? This idea was that if you were nobility, then you felt an obligation to help people who are less fortunate than you. That sure, you'd be given outsized power, but with great power came great responsibility. And this was kind of scorned in the modern era because there was no such thing as an inborn nobility. There was no such thing as a noble class. And that, of course, is true. But what is true is that you don't require a noblesse oblige to see duties to your fellow citizens and duties to your country and duties to your God. A society in which everyone has been freed of the guilt of a moral order in which you have obligations, a society in which everybody has been freed of the shame of the people around them who also believe in that moral order, is a society completely unmoored. You're just going to have a bunch of frivolous people tap dancing on the deck of the Titanic. And that's what it feels like. I mean, it's what our politics feels like. I think it's what's making everybody so despondent about the current presidential race and our politics just generally, is it is, in fact, a clown show. And that is why it rings so hollow when Joe Biden, who has been a frivolous president, he's been a frivolous, foolish president, when he attacks Donald Trump with an ad suggesting that Donald Trump is really concerned about himself, but Joe Biden is concerned about you and higher principle, it doesn't ring true. It doesn't ring true. Donald Trump, as I've said many, many times, is not the killer of American politics. He's the coroner. He stumbled upon the dead body of American politics, and he said, look, it's dead. And everybody blamed him and suggested that he was responsible for the death and frivolity of American politics. But it long predated him. And in fact, his administration, in terms of policy, was far more serious than the administration that immediately preceded it, Barack Obama's, and the administration that immediately took over, Joe Biden's. But here is Joe Biden trying to pretend that he is still living in this sort of morality-based world. Joe Biden hasn't lived in that world his entire political career. He's a lifelong corrupt politician who's shifted his position on every major issue. He doesn't feel any sense of obligation, moral obligation to solve the major problems of the country. He doesn't feel any of that. Are you kidding me? But here's the ad that he's unleashing on Donald Trump.
In the courtroom, we see Donald Trump for who he is. He's been convicted of 34 felonies, found liable for sexual assault, and he committed financial fraud. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's been working, lowering healthcare costs and making big corporations pay their fair share. This election is between a convicted criminal who's only out for himself and a president who's fighting for your family.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
The only family that Joe Biden has ever fought for is his own, and that's only in terms of the cash to bring in. He's perfectly willing to deploy his drug-addled son all over the world, pick up bags of cash on behalf of the family business. It's like if Fredo were the actual godfather, is Joe Biden. The reason, by the way, that he's unleashing these ads right now is because he's getting clobbered in the polls right now. I mean, the polls for Joe Biden continue to be just bad. We'll get to more on this in just one moment. First, with Independence Day right around the corner, what better way to celebrate America's birthday than with 100% American meat? GoodRanchers.com is the #1 place to get 100% American meat for this uniquely American holiday. Celebrate the taste of freedom with savory meats conveniently delivered right to your door, all born, raised, made right here in the United States. Whether you're hosting a backyard barbecue, a poolside party, or a beach bonfire, Good Ranchers has you covered. Right now, you can save on Good Ranchers meat like never before. Subscribe to any Good Ranchers box right now. Get $100 off plus free smoked brats for a year. My listeners can get this special offer by heading on over to GoodRanchers.com and using my code Shapiro. It's more than a great deal. It's a chance to celebrate America by supporting American family farms and enjoying the highest quality American meat. All you have to do to claim this offer is go to GoodRanchers.com, subscribe to any of their custom curated boxes filled with 100% American beef, chicken, pork, or wild-caught seafood. Use my code Shapiro at checkout to claim your $100 off and free smoked brats for a year. That's GoodRanchers.com with promo code Shapiro. GoodRanchers.com, American meat delivered. GoodRanchers.com. According to internal sources of the Democratic Party, reporting to Politico, we've seen in polling since the conviction, the more the conviction is in front and center in voters' attention, the worse it is for Trump. The pollsters said their research concluded Trump's conviction could effectively be used in a broader depiction of Trump as being self-centered and unwilling to take responsibility for his actions. But of course, Joe Biden is the same thing. And here's the thing. Once you have two candidates who the American public generally dislikes and considers frivolous, they're just going to ask the simple question, which one will be better for me? And the answer is pretty obviously Donald Trump will be better for them. This is why, again, I think every attempt by the Biden administration to play their man as some sort of serious thinker and serious doer, a person with a moral compulsion to fix the problems of the country, I think all of that is doomed to failure. When Rachel Maddow is out there saying that Joe Biden has made the United States the envy of the world, the question is, which world is she talking about? Because it ain't this one.
I think the backup plan is run a better campaign, right? There's no reason that Joe Biden's record as a president is a very, very strong record. I mean, we are the economic envy of the world. Right. Doesn't mean our economy is perfect, but literally we are the envy of the world. We've got a better situation than anybody. We've got unemployment rates that we haven't seen in generations. We've got economic growth that any major country in the world would kill for.
Yeah, but that's not the information that they're getting.
But it's true. And so Biden hasn't been disqualified from running for the presidency by anything having to do with any of his performance. It's just that it's going to be a tough fight.
Yeah. Again, if this is the pitch, that Joe Biden is a very serious man for very serious times, then why is he so damned unserious? This is a White House that welcomes Jonathan Van Ness to prance around in the White House press corps room and hang out with Kamala Harris. And I'm supposed to believe these are serious people? In just 1 second, we'll get to more serious policy from the Biden administration. Again, one of our very serious problems in the country is a vast wave of illegal immigration that has been spurred by Joe Biden himself. But how is Joe Biden solving that? The answer is he's not. We'll get to more on that in a moment. First, ladies and gents, the presidential debate is in fact quickly approaching. Next Thursday night, June 27th, Donald Trump and Joe Biden will face off. Their mics will occasionally be muted. Ours will not be, as we bring you exclusive coverage and commentary during a special Daily Wire Backstage. The stakes could not be higher. The nation is barreling toward disaster with soaring inflation, a border crisis, urban decay, and rising crime. That's why the Daily Wire is bringing you front row access to watch every second of this crucial debate live at Daily Wire Plus. You'll get the facts with no filters and no corporate media spin. Join Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Andrew Klavan, Jeremy Boring, and yours truly for cutting-edge analysis in real time as the debate unfolds. We're going to expose and demolish every bit of the nonsense and lying rhetoric that is used during this debate. We're going to use some facts and some logic. So join us for live debate coverage and commentary only the Daily Wire can provide next Thursday night starting at 8:30 Eastern on Daily Wire Plus. Okay, meanwhile, speaking of the immigration situation, Joe Biden has in fact decided to waive penalties for undocumented spouses of American citizens. So we have a massive crisis at the border, a wide open border, some 7+ million people illegally in the United States since Joe Biden took office that we know about. And his decision is that he is going to now legalize many of the illegal immigrants who are already here. According to the Washington Post, the policy shift is a bold move for the Democratic president months before the November elections. As in like bold move, Cotton. We'll see how it works out for you. And a rebuke to congressional Republicans who have ignored his calls to expand border security and to create a path to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented immigrants living in the United States, many for decades. So there was going to be a celebration at the White House to mark the 12-year anniversary of DACA. Well, now he's accelerating more of this. Is this a person trying to solve a problem? Or is this a person who's tap dancing on the deck of the Titanic, hoping to win enough votes to maintain his seat until he plotzes and leaves Kamala Harris in charge? He's doing this even as cities that are ruled by Democrats are whining and complaining about the influx of illegal immigrants. I say whining and complaining because when you call yourself a sanctuary city and then people are like, oh, we'll take you up on that, and then you complain about it, you're a whiner. However, the New York Times is reporting that all over the country, cities are saying, we don't have any room for you. According to the New York Times, the bright orange flyers from the state of Utah were blunt. There is no room in shelters, no hotels for you. It continues. Housing is hard to find and expensive. Food banks are at capacity. Utah has been in recent days urging newcomers at the border and in the United States to consider another state. After traveling to the Texas border from Venezuela with their 2 sons, an illegal immigrant man, an illegal immigrant woman crossed into the United States last September and were soon on a bus chartered by the state of Texas. Bound for Denver, the couple expected that the man would quickly find a job and they'd begin building a new life. Like many of the other migrants, he couldn't work legally. He was competing with odd jobs with other migrants in the same predicament. Their hotel stay was paid for by the city of Denver. That ran out. So now they headed on over to Salt Lake City. But it turns out that people there aren't willing to pay the bills either. So what is Joe Biden's solution to all this? What if we just create a new legalized system for people to get in the country and become citizens and then presumably, again, be dependent on public services? You know, again, all of this is happening in the middle of reports suggesting, according to Breitbart, that after 12 years of DACA, after 12 years of deferred action for childhood arrivals, apparently some 68,000 illegal immigrants with prior arrest records have been granted DACA as of October 2019. Fewer than 30,000 illegal aliens with prior arrests were denied DACA or had their DACA status terminated as a result. More than 25,000 illegal aliens were granted DACA despite having been arrested for drunk driving, along with roughly 3,300 previously arrested for assault, nearly 1,500 previously arrested for burglary, almost 600 previously arrested for hit and run, 259 previously arrested for sex abuse or child rape were given DACA. More than 170 previously arrested for kidnapping. And this is insane, of course. The lack of vetting in the process, as Center for Immigration Studies Director of Policy Jessica Vaughn recently warned. She said the lenient eligibility criteria and light and lean background checks directed by Director Alejandro Mayorkas meant that many individuals with criminal histories were able to obtain DACA. According to a USCIS report, about 12% of all DACA applicants had arrest records, including assault, battery, and driving under the influence, and 85% of those applicants were then approved. And Joe Biden solved for this problem? What if we waive penalties for undocumented spouses? So obviously this is an election year stunt. It's an attempt to garner Hispanic votes, presumably far-left youth votes. But Karine Jean-Pierre says it's not an election year stunt, of course.
How do you respond to Republicans who say this particular move is just an election year stunt?
Look, I'm not here to talk about election year. That's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about the president's policy and why he's doing this, because we have a broken immigration system. The president did this on his first day when he put forth a comprehensive immigration system.
Is it what? You're not here to talk about election year policy. It's just an election year policy? That's it. She was also asked whether the immigration system can actually handle the increased strain of Joe Biden's immigration policy. She has no answers on that, of course.
The administration confident that U.S. citizenship and immigration services can handle possibly hundreds of thousands of new applications, given the current backlog of other immigration applications?
So, look, we have always said, and I said this at the top, like the way that we would love to move forward is in a more balanced approach, obviously, and get that bipartisanship from Congress. The first day of his administration, as I've already stated, and I've stated this many times, we wanted to see a comprehensive immigration process, a legislation. That's what the president put forward.
Again, it is just amazing to me how this administration continues to avoid the big issues, like most of our political class, in favor of simple electioneering in order to what? Get back in power and do stupid Trans Day celebrations at which influencers reveal their surgically created breasts. I mean, like that's what this White House is. It's all frivolous nonsense. It's just frivolous nonsense combined with bad policy. Meanwhile, speaking of the world of frivolous politics, there is a congressional election, a special election primary, well, it's a primary anyway, that is going to be held in the district where the seat is currently occupied by Representative Jamaal Bowman. You'll remember Jamaal Bowman. Jamaal Bowman is the moron who somehow believed that a fire alarm was going to release a door. Remember, he ended up being held in contempt of Congress because he basically held up a congressional vote by pulling a fire alarm. And then he claimed that he wasn't pulling the fire alarm in order to hold up the congressional vote. He instead was doing it because he thought it was going to release the lock on a door. It was all a lie. But Jamaal Bowman is truly one of the stupidest people in American politics. He's running in a very competitive primary against a Republican named George Latimer. Many top-level Democrats have endorsed Latimer because they realize that Jamaal Bowman is a clown. Like, not just a regular-sized clown, like a giant clown with tiny shoes, apparently. He fits into a clown car along with the rest of the squad. Well, Jamaal Bowman has come under serious fire because, of course, Jamaal Bowman is openly anti-Semitic. He says things all the time that are patently insane. In late spring 2022, for example, he apparently reached out to a local Jewish leader in Westchester County to ask for an unusual favor as he prepared to defend his seat in an August primary against two Democratic challengers who were gaining support from his district's sizable Jewish community. His district has a lot of Jews who live in it. So he texted the Jewish leader, quote, "Do you have pics of us so I can show the world I'm friends with Jewish people?" That's an actual text that he sent to an actual human. Remember that time it's racist to say I have a black friend? So that's the actual thing that Jamaal Bowman did. He texted a Jew and was like, "Do you have a picture of me with a Jew so I can show people I like Jews?" The Jewish leader, who described the exchange on the condition of anonymity to protect his privacy, did have at least one photo on hand from a Jewish community gathering in Bowman's district months earlier, at which the then freshman Democrat had vowed to sign on to a House bill aimed at strengthening the Abraham Accords. But by the time Bowman sent his request to the Jewish leader in an apparent effort to counter mounting dissatisfaction with his record on Israel amid the campaign, the New York legislator had since reversed course and then pulled his support for the bill, it was aimed at further normalizing relations between Israel and its Arab neighbors. I was uncomfortable, the Jewish leader said. I kind of joked around with him about it. I said, oh, I'm sure you guys have it. Don't worry about it. He didn't share the photo. I was like, I don't want to be his court Jew. That wasn't what I signed up for. So again, Westchester County George Latimer, who's a popular pro-Israel Democrat, he is currently leading by double digits in the district. He's gotten the endorsements from some of the major Democrats who are capable of endorsing in this race. He has not received, Latimer, the endorsement of some other top Democrats, like, for example, James Clyburn. James Clyburn says that he is not going to endorse in that race, that he hadn't been asked by Bowman to endorse in that race. Okay, but bottom line is that the Democratic Party is now being riffed again by frivolous idiots. This is the rule. This is the true rule here, and it remains amazing. Undefeated. People in politics are incredibly frivolous, incredibly stupid, and pandering to the most radical population available. And that is certainly true of Jamaal Bowman, who I certainly hope will lose his primary next week. He is claiming that if he loses, it's because of the machinations of AIPAC, not because he's a moron who consistently does stupid things and says stupid things and says anti-Semitic things. It must be because of AIPAC. He's not anti-Semitic at all, of course. Meanwhile, I have to say, Rachel Maddow just made the best case for Donald Trump I may have ever heard. So she was on The View yesterday, and apparently she says that she and Joy Behar, another genius, they said that they are very afraid that if Donald Trump wins the election, that Donald Trump will take them off the air. Man, don't threaten me with a good time.
You said recently that you thought that you, as an outspoken critic, could be a target yourself. Some people think that sounds overdramatic, but I'm right there with you. I think that he is so vindictive that he will go after, however he has to, through the IRS maybe, or even through sponsors to get us off the air maybe, or you. Yeah. How seriously should we be taking that?
Well, so I was asked, am I worried about me? And my answer was, I'm worried about all of us. I'm no more worried about me than I am worried about everybody in the country. I think it's bad to have somebody saying, give me as much power as you can in this country so I can use it to go after other Americans. So I can use it to go after these subhuman internal enemies and I'll destroy them. Like, that's just not a good system for anybody.
Wow, maybe you should take a look at Joe Biden, who literally declared that it was going to be a pandemic of the unvaccinated, and then did a speech in front of a blood-red lit Independence Hall in Philadelphia, declaring his political enemies enemies of democracy and the republic. Okay, listen, I've poured a lot of scorn on the frivolous among the Democrats. On the Republican side of the aisle, the Wall Street Journal now reports that the House Ethics Committee said on Tuesday it's investigating Florida Republican Representative Matt Gaetz. You remember Matt Gaetz from such special episodes as Matt Gaetz decides that Kevin McCarthy shouldn't be Speaker of the House for some unspecified reason and blows up the entire system and nothing gets better. You remember that? That was great. Anyway, he's being investigated over allegations that he may have engaged in sexual misconduct and illicit drug use. The secretive 10-member panel released a letter Tuesday in which it said it was clarifying its investigation into the four-term lawmaker because of the significant and unusual amount of public reporting on the case. Gaetz has denied wrongdoing. He said on social media, past probes, quote, emerged from lies intended solely to smear me. The committee is, quote, now opening new frivolous investigations. He said the panel is doing this to avoid the obvious fact that every investigation into me ends the same way, my exoneration. The DOJ had investigated Gaetz for several years, beginning in 2020, for allegations of sex trafficking, which he denied. That investigation was, in fact, closed without charges. The House Ethics Committee continued to probe Gaetz. Gaetz is facing a primary challenge in his district right now. He's likely to win that particular primary. It's not a particularly competitive primary from what I understand. The ethics panel said it had difficulty in obtaining relevant information from Gaetz, and they said they've spoke with more than a dozen witnesses, issued 25 subpoenas, reviewed thousands of pages of documents. Apparently, the panel has determined some of the allegations merit review. The panel says that it is investigating whether Gaetz accepted improper gifts, dispensed special privileges and favors to individuals with whom he had a personal relationship, and sought to obstruct government investigations of his conduct. My complaint with Matt Gaetz is that his frivolity is largely rooted in a disdain for the normal workings of politics inside the House of Representatives, where it's much more interesting to be notorious in social media than it is to actually engage in the hard work of of doing the thing that actually is necessary if you're the House of Representatives, which, of course, there are a lot of people in the House who are not interested in doing that. This month marks 2 years since the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Did you know the number of abortions have actually increased since then? New estimates show that more than 1 million babies were killed by abortion in 2023. That's the highest number of abortions since 2012. The overturning of Roe versus Wade has unfortunately made the abortion pill more readily available. It now accounts for up to 64% of all abortions. But Preborn continues to stand strong. Preborn is the largest pro-life organization in the country. They provide free ultrasounds to moms dealing with unplanned pregnancies to introduce them to the precious life growing inside them. When a mother meets her baby on ultrasound and hears the heartbeat, she's twice as likely to choose life. Every day, Preborn rescues 200 lives. So how can you help? One ultrasound costs only $28 and could be the difference between life and death. Please join the fight by sponsoring 1, 2, or more ultrasounds. If you have the means, you can sponsor Preborn's entire network for a day for $5,000. Whatever gift you give will go towards saving lives. All gifts are tax deductible. Go to preborn.com/Ben to donate today. That's preborn.com/Ben or dial pound 250, say keyword baby. That's pound 250 baby. Preborn is saving lives today. And meanwhile, more controversy from the Middle East, of course. So Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, yesterday released a video in which he said to the Biden administration that it was about time that they stopped their quasi-arms embargo. This apparently pissed off the White House. So the way that it works in this relationship is that the Biden administration can openly attempt to oust Netanyahu from office by deploying Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, to declare that Netanyahu should literally be thrown out of office. Their favorite columnists, like Barak Ravid, can stump against Netanyahu's coalition every single day. Tom Friedman, the utter dullard of the New York Times foreign policy page, who gets all of his opinions from local cab drivers in various locales, wrote a column, I kid you not, in which he claimed just yesterday that, effectively speaking, Netanyahu had to go and Sinwar had to stay. That's what Thomas Friedman was effectively saying. He said that leaving Sinwar in charge of the Gaza Strip would be a victory. He said, yes, I can hear the criticism from the war hawks right now. Friedman, you would let leader Yahya Sinwar come out of his tunnel and declare victory? Yes, I would. In fact, I wish I could be at the news conference in Gaza when he does, so I could ask the first question. And then he writes this little fictional exchange, because Thomas Friedman, my God, that guy's, there's nothing between his ears. Nothing. Except for pure venom for Netanyahu, apparently. Here's what he writes. I mean, this guy is the leading foreign policy columnist for the New York Times, just to explain how stupid that paper is. Quote, I wish I could be at the news conference in Gaza when he does so. There will be no news conferences in Gaza. What in the hell are you talking about, Thomas Friedman, you dullard? Oh my God. What news? Mr. Sinwar, you claim this is a great victory for a total Israeli withdrawal and a stable ceasefire. I just want to know, what existed on October 6th between you and Israel before your surprise attack? Oh, let me answer that. A total Israeli withdrawal from Gaza and a stable ceasefire. If you don't mind, I'd like to stick around for a few days to watch you explain to Gazans how you started an 8-month war so you could get Gaza back to exactly where it was on October 6th in a ceasefire with Israel and no Israeli troops here. Another victory like this in Gaza will be permanently unlivable. And to Israelis who would ask, Friedman, are you crazy? You would let Sinwar run Gaza again? My answer would again be yes for now. The alternatives, Israel running Gaza or Gaza becoming another Somalia, are far worse. So we've now come all the way around, because Friedman is basically a proxy for the Biden administration, from the Biden administration saying that Israel has a duty to extirpate after October 7th, to Thomas Friedman saying should win. Okay, he's such a fool. He doesn't understand how mentality in the Middle East works at all. Yahya Sinwar does not have to run Gaza as a functional government. If he did, he would have been ousted long ago. All he has to do is declare victory. And Thomas Friedman's bizarre belief that the Gazans are going to rise up and oust Sinwar for maladministration. Sure. Show me an example, Thomas. But these are, anyway, so Netanyahu cuts a video in which he says that it's about time for the United States to stop the slowing of the flow of weaponry to Israel so they can finish the war in Gaza and move on. Here was Netanyahu's video.
Secretary Blinken was recently here in Israel. We had a candid conversation. I said I deeply appreciated the support the U.S. has given Israel from the beginning of the war. But I also said something else. I said it's inconceivable that in the past few months, the administration has been withholding weapons and ammunition to Israel. Israel, America's closest ally, fighting for its life, fighting against Iran and our other common enemies. Secretary Blinken assured me that the administration is working day and night to remove these bottlenecks. I certainly hope that's the case.
Okay, so the White House responded with outrage. How dare Netanyahu say what we already said publicly? Remember, it was Joe Biden who went on CNN and said publicly that he was going to stop the shipment of weapons to Israel if Israel went into Rafah, and then proceeded to actually slow the flow of weapons to Israel. So now they're just denying it. So here's Karine Jean-Pierre, world's worst press secretary, saying we have no idea what he's talking about when he says that the flow of weapons has been slow. You literally said that you were going to do that, so I'm confused.
There was a shipment of bombs paused in early May at the start of the Rafah offensive, but has the administration been withholding weapons and ammunitions for months, like Netanyahu seems to be saying?
Let me just start off by saying that we generally do not know what he's talking about. We just don't.
Oh, you don't? I feel like you do, since literally your president went on national TV and said the thing. Again, just pure stupidity. Apparently, the White House has now canceled a meeting with the Israelis over Iran policy because they're mad. According to Barack Ravid, who again is the sycophant and massager-in-chief for Joe Biden's administration, President Biden's top advisors were enraged by the video. The White House decided to go a step farther by canceling Thursday's meeting. Quote, this decision makes it clear there are consequences for pulling such stunts. The Americans are fuming. Bibi's video made a lot of damage, a senior Israeli official said. I'm sorry. This administration is such a joke. Like, there's an actual war in the Middle East involving an exterminationist terror group and a Democratic ally of the United States. And Joe Biden is very upset because Bibi Netanyahu made a video saying that maybe he should get the weapons. By the way, Vladimir Zelensky says that every single day. Every day, Vladimir Zelensky in Ukraine says that. Every day. And Joe Biden couldn't be chummier with the guy. So it's not about the policy. It's about something else. Alrighty, coming up, we're going to jump into the vaunted Ben Shapiro Show mailbag. You have to be a member in order to have your question answered there. So head on over and take care of that right now. Become a member. Use code Shapiro at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.